Hi. I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking. And this time I've been thinking about trauma and whether it's possible to recover from a traumatic experience. The reason I've been thinking about trauma is because of something that happened in my life a few years ago and how it still challenges me now, but also how much I've learnt from it and the different perspective it's given me about life. So I've got a few things that I'd like to share. So firstly, I suppose I ought to share what the trauma was so that you can start to understand the challenge. So here goes. Well, it started on a very ordinary October evening a few years ago. I was at home with my husband and children, and we had an ordinary dinner, watched some ordinary TV, and went to bed at an ordinary time and fell asleep. All very ordinary. And then for some reason, I woke up in the night around 2 a.m. and I thought I heard my husband making a strange noise, and I wondered if he was having a bad dream. I was awake, so I carried on listening, and I realised that I couldn't hear anything, literally nothing, complete silence. And I'm not sure why I thought it was so strange, but it just felt too silent. So I gave him a bit of a nudge and nothing. So I gave him a bit of a harder nudge and still nothing. So then I gave him a really big shake to try and wake him up, and still nothing. So that's when I realised that something bad was happening. So I jumped out of bed, put the light on, and grabbed my phone, which was switched off at the time. So I had to wait for my phone to switch on, and I don't switch my phone off anymore. And then I kind of couldn't believe it when I was calling for an ambulance, and I was still trying to wake him up, and then when they answered and said, the first thing they said is the patient breathing? And I couldn't hardly believe it when my answer was no. So I started trying to pump on his chest, and the call handler said that I needed to get him onto the floor to be able to do that. So he's a lot bigger than me, so really I had no idea how I was going to do that. I tried pulling on the sheets. I literally couldn't get him to move at all. So they said I should try pulling him by the ankles. So I tried with all my strength, and gradually I managed to get him to the point where he fell onto the floor, still completely unresponsive and face down. So then I had to roll him onto his back so that I could start giving him CPR until the ambulance arrived. I'd thrown my phone onto the floor, but the call handler was still talking to me and talking me through what to do. And they counted with me as I pumped on his chest. And he was still completely unresponsive, so I had absolutely no idea what was happening. I thought maybe he'd fainted or he'd wake up in a minute. I literally had no idea. I just kept counting and pumping as hard as I could. I had to actually stop and run downstairs to open the front door for the ambulance, and then run back upstairs again and carry on. And it just felt like forever until the ambulance crew arrived and took over. I still didn't know what was happening, but I went downstairs and waited, got out of the way while they took care of him and waited for some news. It turned out they used a defibrillator and needed to deliver several shocks, and they managed to bring him back. But by that point, he'd not been breathing for quite a long time. The children had woken up by then, because of all the noise, and so they were also waiting downstairs with me. And eventually four paramedics managed to carry him down the stairs on a stretcher, and then he was taken off to hospital. And I was quietly told to expect the worst and to get to the hospital as soon as I could. So anyway, he was put in a coma and had his core temperature reduced, which aims to reduce the risk of brain damage that could be caused from the lack of breathing for that amount of time. I was told that my actions had given him a chance of survival, but that the next few days would be critical, and also that there probably wouldn't be any updates for at least a couple of days while they kept him in that induced coma. They said that he'd had a cardiac arrest, and I didn't even know what that was. I thought it was a fancy name for a heart attack, and so that led me to telling people that he'd had a heart attack. So, oops, I was wrong about that. If you also don't know, a heart attack is caused by a blockage, whereas a cardiac arrest is caused by a problem with the electrical activity of the heart, which is what makes it beat. And his heart had gone into what they called fibrillation, which basically means that it's beating so fast and so light that it's actually useless and not pumping any blood at all. And the reason that a defibrillator can work is that the shock from the defibrillator actually stops the heart, and then it gives it a chance to reset itself and start beating again normally. This was all news to me. I actually studied human biology at college a long time ago, but I didn't know any of that. I also learned a few other things about cardiac arrest while he was in hospital that I didn't enjoy hearing. And that was that the chances of survival for people who have a cardiac arrest who aren't already in a hospital when it happens is less than 8%. So more than 92% don't survive. So things were looking really bad. And I needed to decide what to tell the children. I stuck with just telling them that he's safe in hospital and that they're looking after him really well. So don't worry, and I'll let you know when they give me an update. So they accepted that, and I did my best to carry on as if he'd just gone away for a few days on a trip. I did go and sit with him each day for an hour or so, and watch the ventilator pump his chest up and down while all the machines beeped and measured things. So they woke him up after about 3 days, and he was very confused and tired. But when he opened his eyes, he knew who I was. So that was an amazing start. Well, it's been a bit of a journey since then, but the good news is he did survive, and he did make a good recovery, although it took quite a long time. The doctors still haven't been able to find a cause for the cardiac arrest, so he's now got an implanted defibrillator, which is there to protect him if it does happen again, which it has. Anyway, that's another story. So it's really an amazing story of survival against the odds. But we're left with the knowledge that whatever caused it isn't cured, so it could happen again at any time. We've both been affected by the trauma of it, but in quite different ways. He can't actually remember anything from that time period, so he doesn't really have trauma from the memories, but probably more from the things that happened afterwards, whereas I've been traumatised by the whole experience. And, as a consequence of that, I started to think that other people might die during the night, including me. And I was always quite surprised when everyone was still alive in the morning. So over the last few years, I've had to learn a lot about living with fear, anxiety, and trying to have resilience and courage so that I can try to live a positive and happy life despite those challenges. The risk of sudden death is really scary, and I've had times when I've struggled to face the day ahead. So I really understand what it's like to be afraid. Yeah, I didn't like leaving the house. I preferred to be near a hospital. So every day became quite difficult, everyday life. I couldn't bring myself to make any plans for the future because I didn't really see the point. I didn't believe that there would be one. So I did a lot of thinking about all of that, and it did kind of seem logical to me that I should try to keep everyone as safe as possible every day. But the problem with that is that it's no life. And I realised that there's no point in surviving if you're not going to do anything with that life. So that was a bit of a turning point, and that's when I kind of became determined not to let that spoil the rest of my life and to make me live in fear. So I started taking small steps back towards the sort of life that I wanted for us. And, I found ways to work on those feelings of panic. I got my breathing under control to help me stay calm. I found that there's a lot of help available for trauma. I learnt some CBT techniques, that's cognitive behavioural therapy, and that was really useful. Particularly, it helped me learn how to stop my overactive imagination, trying to predict bad things in the future and kind of scaring the life out of me. And so instead I created this little mantra for myself, which I repeat whenever I need it. And it goes like this. Whatever happens, I'll deal with it. And that's it. Just those few words. And they helped me to stop trying to plan for every horrible version of the future that my imagination wanted to throw at me. I just answered back with, whatever happens, I'll deal with it, and closed it down. So it's taken time, and I can honestly say that most of the time now I'm happy, I'm calm, I'm enjoying life, and I'm also planning for the future. So I'm just hope that by sharing this, I might help and inspire other people who are dealing with something traumatic. The things that we've been through, have given us a different perspective on life. So although I wouldn't wish the experience on others, I do think that in some ways it's been a bit of a gift. I know that I would have appreciated hearing a positive story, when I was trying to see a way forward. So that's why I wanted to share this one. I can't forget what happened, but that also means that I don't forget that being alive is a gift, and really there aren't many things that are truly worth worrying about and spoiling my day for. So, back to the question of whether it's possible to recover from trauma. I think my answer is sort of. I think it's possible to move on positively after something traumatic if you make the decision to do that and you're willing to put in a bit of work. I've still got certain things that can trigger me into a bit of a panic, but I know what to do when that happens, and I can generally get myself back on track because I've got more coping strategies and more resilience than I used to have, and that's great. I also know that whatever happens, I'll deal with it. So I hope you can take something positive away from that story. I'm sure that some of these themes will come up again in my videos, but I think that's all for this time. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.